Hello and welcome to this episode. I'm sitting here today. I'm waiting for YouTube to approve a video that I did, and it's a video that got flagged. Um, it is controversial. My hunch is YouTube is probably not going to approve it. I wish they would approve it, but I'm not holding out a lot of hope. They said they're going to have a person watch it and make a determination. But the reality is, we live in a society today where telling people the truth is considered offensive. If you say something that triggers someone, even though it's the truth and it needs to be said to protect people, it's deemed inappropriate. And there's a lot of words that I used in the video that are probably, if they use software to read it, it's probably going to get denied. And yet, it's actually one that if a human watched the whole thing, they would realize what it's being flagged for is the exact opposite of what he's trying to say. But they use keywords, and there's going to be words in there that it's frustrating because there's so many people with these medical challenges who are they need to be able to hear alternative points of view. They need to be able to hear the truth about things. And they're being denied that access because certain people, certain groups of individuals, they say they're offended, and that shuts the whole conversation down. And at the end of the day, that's all we're trying to do is save lives. But sometimes you gotta to save a life, you gotta be honest with people. And but if you offend people by being honest, you're not allowed to have what you have to say heard. And this is a perfect example. The video I'm talking about, lives were lost because people weren't allowed to speak honestly. And I won't lie, I'm frustrated by it. And I don't know what the rules have to do to be changed. I'm absolutely a believer that you should not say certain things about certain people. I mean, I understand that. But we should be putting, people who share content, we should have the ability to be able to put a warning label up that's approved and warns people that this may be offensive. This, just like you do with a rating scale. And let the person who's deciding whether they want to watch the video, let them for themselves make the decision instead of just always having these, social media platforms determine for society what is the community standard acceptance. And I realize there has to be certain things restricted, but there's a lot of people trying to help and do things, and we're just not allowed to do what we know. We are just silenced. And yet at the end of the day, we're the ones that somehow got out. When you're in war, and you got out, hell or high water. If you're going to send your children into war, that's who you want to have. Do you want the guy that never went to war and has no idea other than what he learned in a classroom, or do you want the guy who's bleeding? I don't know about you, but when it comes to medical battles for a lot of people are wars. And the people who emerge on the other side, battle scarred, wounded, bleeding, but alive, they got something valuable to share. And just because it's not medically acknowledged doesn't mean it's not truth and useful. And it doesn't mean it doesn't save lives. It just means it never got the stamp of approval of people who, frankly, themselves have never survived a war. There's a lot of doctors out there who know everything about medicine except what it is to be the patient fighting the war of survival. You can be a neurologist and know everything about the central nervous system, but you know nothing about laying there in the bed and the horror that a stroke can cause an individual who can no longer speak or move. There's a neurologist, they did a documentary. I don't remember what streaming service did this, but it was a neurologist who developed dementia. And he said that what he did not know until he knew, because he developed dementia, was tragic for so many of his patients. Until you yourself a lot of times have a condition, there's no way for you to fully comprehend what's occurring. You can understand the science behind it, but you can't understand the human factor. You may think you can. You may want to believe you can. It's just like somebody who's homeless or hungry. You may think you know what it is to be hungry. But being hungry because there's no money for food is different than being hungry because you didn't go to the grocery store this week and now there's, nothing you want to eat in the fridge. We have gotten so far away from the humanity factor of decision making in the United States as well as throughout other countries in this world. We've lost that element of humanity. And now a handful of social media platforms decide for everybody what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I hope YouTube, I hope Facebook looks at videos instead of computerizing videos. Because you just cannot sometimes save lives without putting real eyes on the situation. Over the years, I've been in that situation where you got technology looking and not seeing what it's not programmed to detect. But then we stick eyes on the problem, and it's very clear the technology was not able to see what it wasn't programmed to look for. Technology is an amazing, amazing tool. And it's probably doing more good in the current state than harm. But at some point, there's a paradox shift that happens. And when that happens, you can't turn away and save the ship. There's a danger out there that's permeating human beings right now. And people don't realize how altering it is to the human central nervous system. And even though it seems like we're living longer and we're doing better, there's a cliff. All right. You folks have a good evening. Be careful. Be careful. There's a lot going on. That people need to be very, very cautious of. I'm not your enemy. I've never been your enemy. But I've never shut up when I've been told to shut up either. And that's been the right thing to do, even though it's cost me dearly, dearly over the years. All right, we will see you on the next one. Take care. Have a good evening.